All right, I will say good morning, and welcome to Meseches Sotah. What an incredible schus. Shechiyanu v'kiyimanu v'hiyanu lazman hazeh. What an incredible schus to open up every single Masechta. Baruch Hashem. There's an excitement, there's an energy. Baruch haba to the new shir members who are joining us both here in person as well as online. A great schus. To the veteran shir members, make sure to make the new guys feel welcome and give them a shalom aleichem and introduce yourself and say hello. Baruch Hashem, it's a great zuchus. We have the opportunity, as we saw last night at the Siyum, to really forge beautiful relationships that are solidified and in Torah, which are the best kind of relationships, the most meaningful kind of relationships. Me'eretz Hashem, we should be zocheh to build them for many, many years to come. To thank our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Nissan, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all the Shir Drushos this month in memory of Paul's parents, Shmuel ben Zechariah and Sarah bas Avrohom. To thank Avraham and Shaindy Kelman for dedicating all the Shir Drushos this month in memory of Avraham's mother, Sarah Bryna bas Yehoshua Heschel Zechariah Livracha. And to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Natan Leah Berry, for dedicating the shir to the nischus of Bill Eskin's continued recovery and in honor of resuming the Daf Yomi journey. May Meretz Hashem have a complete and enduring refuah together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. We will say with that, let us begin. Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Daf Beis Moshe, I will tell you that part of my excitement starting the Masechta is I love seeing people with new Gemaras. Right? Baruch Hashem, very, very exciting, especially those who are opening up, very, very exciting to see. Baruch Hashem, halavai, even when the Gemara gets old, right? I say that, I should have said that in the wrong way. Even when the volume gets old, in Meretz Hashem, the content should always feel new. I will say the Mishnah says as follows, Hamakana le'ishto. So we'll say, so just by way of introduction, very quickly, we know that there's a process there's a concept of the Isha Sotah. The Isha Sotah is a woman who is suspected of adultery. And if she's suspected of adultery, again, without adding what we'll call, it's actually interesting, because if you remember again, the last couple of Mishnayos in Nazir kept on repeating the same phrase. Remember again, what was the phrase? Anyone remember? I know it's not Zav, and it's not Moli Tarkov Karvod. What was it? Raglayim L'davar. Raglayim L'davar. That was the phrase that appeared in the last four Mishnayos. So, Yesh Raglayim L'davar. Raglayim L'davar, now, in general, Raglayim L'davar means there's circumstantial evidence. Right? Circumstantial evidence. There's something compelling. So we have an Isha Sotah, who is a process that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Point over here, she's suspected of adultery. But because we do not have definitive proof of her infidelity, she's brought to the Beis HaMikdash, and there's a process. And that process includes drinking certain waters, which we'll get into. We are starting now at the beginning of that process. And the way that process begins is with a warning. A husband goes ahead and issues a warning to his wife. That's the topic of our Mishnah. Hamakana le'ishto. A man gives a warning to his wife. So I will say, so the shaila becomes, how does that warning exactly occur? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Mekanala al pi shnayim, umashka pi eidechad. So I will say, Rabbi Eliezer's frame. Now again, we're going to use machlokes in the actual framework itself. So Rabbi Eliezer says, the warning itself is given in the presence of two witnesses, but ultimately, again, umashke. I will say mashke means she's given to drink, al pi eidech. And I will say, what we're going to define in the Gemara what all of these terms mean. So again, the warning, which we don't know what the warning is yet, but whatever that warning is, Rabbi Eliezer says that warning is delivered in the presence of two witnesses. Now I will say, mashke would seem to mean she drinks. Now when is the Isha Sotah going to drink? When is the Sotah going to drink? I will say, by the way, I also just want to point out, we're going to see, and it's important to say this, because Sotah, obviously, there's a heavy focus, ultimately, again, on the woman and her infidelity. One of the things that Chazal are really going to highlight over here is that where there is this level of dysfunction in a marriage, that these types of things are occurring, it takes two. So I just want to point out, and we'll talk about the husband's liability and the husband's culpability in scenarios like this as well. In any event, so the Mishnah says follows. So mashkap yachad means she's going to drink based on the testimony of one witness, which bepashtos means that if she's in violation of the warning, and there's only one witness to attest to her violation of the warning, that's enough to make her drink the Meis Sotah. Fine. Or for that matter, again, even if the husband himself has the ability to say that she's violated the warning, and therefore that would cause her to drink. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yehoshua says no. Mekanala api shnayim umashka api shnayim. Rabbi Yehoshua says we're both saying fundamental machlokes. No, we're both say mekana. We're going to use the word kinui. Right? Warning has to occur in the presence of two witnesses, and the truth is the only thing that triggers her to drink ultimately is what? Violation of that warning and testimony by two witnesses that she violated the warning. Okay, fundamental machlokes. I says the Gemara, Ketzad Mekanala. I will say, what's the case of kinui? How does a husband warn his wife in this type of situation? Omer la b'fnei shnayim. He says to her in front of two witnesses, because remember again, both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua both agree that kinui has to occur in the presence of two witnesses. So I will say, what's the case of kinui? Your husband says in front of two witnesses, Omer la b'fnei shnayim, al tidabriim ish ploni v'dibriim one. I will say, here's what's confusing a little bit about the Mishnah. The Mishnah is actually giving us an example of inappropriate kinui. This is not kinui, I will say. In other words, he's saying in this case over here, don't speak, right? Reuven says to Rachel, I don't want you to talk with Shimon. I don't want you to talk with Shimon. Now, I'll say now what the Mishnah says, v'dibra imo, but yet what happens if Rachel violated that warning and she spoke with Shimon? Adayin hi muteres labesu muteres la'echol b'truma. Ultimately, again, she is permitted to go ahead and she's permitted to live with her husband. And if she's an Eishes Kohen, if Reuben is a Kohen, she's permitted to eat Truma. And I will say, okay, word outside here for just a second. This is not the way to give kinui, which is a little bit, Gemara is going to question this, right? Because the Mishnah says, Ketzad, what's the case of kinui? And then the Mishnah gives a case that's not kinui. Because what it says, we're going to see, kinui goes like this. Reuben says to his wife Rachel, I do not want you being alone with Shimon. And I will say, now the truth is, even without the warning, Rachel is not allowed to be alone with Shimon. Why? Because a married woman in general is not, that's yichud, right? A married woman is not allowed to be alone with another man. So really, I want to point out over here, Reuven, in a proper case of kinui, Reuven is not answering anything to his wife that she's already not allowed to do. Right? But Lamaisa, again, what he's doing is he's upping the ante in the event that she violates the warning. Okay, so I'll say, so therefore the Mishnah is actually giving us an example of the kinui that's not appropriate. In other words, a husband doesn't have the right to issue a kinui to his wife that says, you're not allowed to speak with Shimon. Right? He's allowed to say have concerns about your conversations with Shimon, but he's not allowed to issue a formal kinui saying you can't speak with Shimon is not going to be halachically effective. So again, we'll question the structure of the Mishnah in the Gemara itself. So therefore, if Reuven says to Rachel, don't speak with Shimon, and she speaks with Shimon, what are the halachic ramifications of the violation of that warning? And the answer is nothing. However, he says, Nichnas sa'imo lebeis ha'seiser. But if Rachel was alone with Shimon in a private place, and she's alone with him enough for something to have occurred, again, we'll discuss how long that is, right? Asur labeisa v'asur lechal b'truma. She is asur to her husband, and she is not allowed to eat truma if she's a wife of a Kohen, right? V'imeis choletzes v'lo misyabames. And I will say, if her husband dies, if Reuven dies without children, before she has a chance to drink the Sotah waters, what's talaha? She cannot do yibum, and she must do chalitza. She can't do yibum, she must do chalitza. Again, we'll talk about that. And I will say, I just want to be clear, the Mishnah sounds like what it's saying is that even an inappropriate kinui could trigger the Sotah process. So we're going to challenge that concept, right? Because, again, that doesn't seem to make that much. In other words, if the kinui is not good, then how could the kinui go ahead and trigger the rest of the process? So, okay, sit tight. We'll go ahead and answer what the Mishnah will say. But bottom line, here's what I want you to take from the Mishnah. Number one, right? Essentially, we'll say there are three parts of the Sotah process. Part one, kinui, right? Warning. That's where husband says to his wife, Reuven says to Rachel, don't be alone with Shimon. Part two of Sotah process, stira. Right? Rachel is alone with the man about whom she was warned about. It will say, now again, what's Rachel's status after she's alone with Shimon? What's Rachel's status? Unknown, right? Because again, remember, all we have now is we have a warning and we have violation of the warning. What we don't know is what happened when she was alone with Shimon. In other words, did something illicit occur or the Maisa not? That triggers then shtia. right? That's the drinking of the Sotah, the drinking of the Sotah waters. Although again, we're going to see there's some intermediary processes as well. But it's the waters which ultimately again resolve her guilt or determine her guilt or not, her guilt or her innocence. Now we'll say I understand the machlokes in the Mishnah. So now the shaila is, okay, what testimonial threshold do you need for each of these processes? So it sounds like between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, they're both agreeing that you need two witnesses ultimately again for kinui, right? For warning. That everyone's agreed on. The shaila is, how many witnesses do you need in order to testify that she was in violation of stira, that she was alone with Shimon? So Rabbi Eliezer says, you only need eid echad, right? One witness, or even just the husband himself. Right? Rabbi Yehoshua says, no, you need two witnesses for every stage, right? You need two witnesses for kinui and two witnesses ultimately for stira. Beautiful. We'll say, that's our Mishnah. Mazel tov, I'm completing the first Mishnah, Maseches Sotah. Incredible. Rabbi Chananya, no, I'm just kidding. Let's go. Right, so let's fight there. So Tana, we're actually going to try to do Daf Yomi in this Masechta, right? And get through the Davim. So here we go, we'll say, Michti. We'll say, the Gemara looks familiar. It's because we had it right at the beginning of Maseches Nazir as well. Michti. Tana mi Nazir Salik, my Tana de Katana Sotah. Let's say, so we just finished Maseches Nazir. Mazel tov. Right? The success is still fresh. We just finished Nazir. Right? Why are we going into Sotah? To which the Gemara said, Rebbe, we'll say, Mamish has beginning of Nazir. Tisan Rebbe, Omer Lama Nismucha Parshas Nazir, the Parshas Sotah. Why does the Torah juxtapose the Parsha of Nazir to the Parsha of Sotah? Lomar Lecha, Shekol Aroa Sotah B'Kilkula, Yazir Atzmo Min Hayayim. I will say, to teach us the fundamental principle, that when someone sees the Sotah, right, Sotah B'Kilkula, in other words, I will say, someone sees, unfortunately, one thing that Sotah represents, I will say, whether or not she committed adultery or not, what does Sotah represent? Sotah represents dysfunction. And we're going to talk about this, that there are multiple levels of dysfunction in a marriage that gets to this point. And also we're going to see one of the incredible pieces of Maseches Sotah. It sounds strange, but are the dramatic lessons in Shalom Bayis that we're going to see as well. In any event, that a person sees Sotah B'Kilkula, a person who sees that now this marriage is falling apart, right? This woman potentially committed an act of infidelity. And remember again, if there's a woman who conducted an act or committed an act of infidelity, we'll say, what does that mean? Right? There's a man who was involved in this also. In other words, that Lamaisa, it's not just, in other words, that there are people who are potentially committing acts of immorality. So ultimately, again, I will say, often, when there are acts of immorality, what often kind of is present in the same type of area? Alcohol. And therefore, again, Yazir Atzma Min Hayayin. Ultimately, again, so I say the Torah juxtaposes Nazir ultimately to Sotah to tell us that, again, a person sees such depravity, a person sees such immoral behavior. So again, kind of like the reflex reaction is to become a Nazir. Hence the juxtaposition. I says to go, well, okay, here's the problem. The problem is the order of the Masechtas doesn't follow the order of the juxtaposition. The listening Sotah, V'hadra listening Nazir. So we'll say, okay, I hear this, I totally hear this, because remember, I will say, the juxtaposition that the Gemara is referring to is the biblical juxtaposition. In the Torah is the section of Sotah, and then the section of Nazir. So says the Gemara, okay, I get it, I hear, but then put Maseches Sotah first, and Maseches Nazir afterwards. To which the Gemara says, no, here's the problem. I did the Tana Ksubis, the Tana Hamad, and I will say, because there's a bigger picture I play over here. What's the bigger picture? We have Maseches Ksubis, right? In Seder Nashim, Maseches Ksubis. And how does Maseches Ksubis end off? With a discussion about Nidarim. So therefore, again, Maseches Ksubis, and therefore, because Maseches Ksubis ends off with the discussion about Nidarim, I put in there Maseches Nidarim, right? Va'aydi Tana Nidarim, Tana Nazir. Now, once I'm talking about Nidarim, it makes the most sense to put what Masechta after Nidarim? Nazir. Why? Because in Neder Gedol Mizol, right? It's like a paradigmatic Neder. So I got to put Nazir there, and I will say Didamin Nidarim, and therefore, again, once I put Nidarim, then obviously the next Masechta that ultimately makes sense to follow it is Sotah. So it's like the juxtaposition. So again, I'm going to put Sotah after Nazir because of the biblical juxtaposition between Sotah and Nazir. But Lamaisa, we flip the order because it follows in the proper order of the Masechtas. Ksubas, and the Ksubas talks about Nidarim, therefore put in there Masechtas Nidarim. Once you're talking about Nidarim, you got to go into Nazir. Everyone knows that, right? You got to go into Nazir because Nazir is a Neder. And then once I finish Nazir, I follow the biblical juxtaposition, albeit in the reverse order, and put in there Sotah. I will say two dramatic lessons from this. Number one I will say is, you know what's fascinating about this? When you look at it in a vacuum, the Nazir Sotah juxtaposition, of course the juxtaposition goes Sotah and the Nazir. I will say, but that's when you look at it in a vacuum. The Gemara is saying, you can't look at things in a vacuum. Things are part of a bigger picture. And so sometimes Rabbi said this happens all the time. It happens in relationships, it happens in life, where I see things like in a very myopic way. I see an issue, and I see it like this. And I don't see it as part of a bigger context. And so when you see things only like with tunnel vision, and you see things only like right here, right now, it happens with what I said, I'll give you an example. In a marriage, a couple gets into a fight, or your child does something wrong. So it's so tempting to only focus on that thing right in front of you right now. You did this. Or you could zoom out a little bit and you could say, it's true, you did this, but you also did all these great things, all these wonderful things. You have a good track record of a relationship. So let's look at it in context. So the Gemara says, when you zoom in, so Sotah comes first, Nazir comes second. When you zoom out and look at a little bit of a panoramic view and view things in context, you recognize that what? There's a bigger picture. And when you are a big picture person, it allows you to navigate sometimes the bumps of life just a little bit better. One more piece, then we're going weiter. The Imre, I was supposed to say, this is absolutely beautiful. The Ger Rebbe says that there's another lesson that the Gemara is trying to teach us. At the end of the day, the proper order would have been Sotah and then Nazir. Sotah and then Nazir. But we've now put it as Nazir and then Sotah. The Imre Emes says something so beautiful. We've spoken about this many times, but its formulation here is so magnificent. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Surmei Ravi Asei Tov. And generally, again, the concept of Surmei Ravi Asei Tov says that in life, if you want to get spiritual traction, you first have to avoid anything negative, Surmei Ra, and then ultimately, again, then your positive actions could be meaningful. But if you just go ahead and you're just doing good, but you haven't resolved the negativity, I've said, what is that like? Remember the phrase you always use? Tovel v'sheretz biyado. It's like going to the mikveh and holding on to the negativity. But it says the Imre Emes, there are times in life where I cannot deal with my Ra. There are just times in life where I cannot deal with my Ra. And sometimes, again, like, for whatever the reason, my challenges are too overwhelming, right? What's broken in me is too painful, and I just can't deal with it right now. So the Rebbe says, in those moments in life when you cannot deal with your Ra, focus on amplifying your Tov. Okay, I got it. I can't deal with that which is broken, so what I'm going to just do is I'm going to redouble my efforts to just pump more good into my life. And the hope is that with the more good, the greater level of Kedusha, I'll be armed with the ability to focus on my deficiencies and to focus on that which is broken at some point in time. So the Rebbe says like this, so he'll say, get ready for this. He says, that's the pshat. See, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says in the Torah, Sotah comes before Nazir. Why? Sotah represents the Ra, Nazir represents the Tov. Although Nazir representing Tov is machlokes also. So the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, listen, here's the order. Deal with your Sotah, and then you could become a Nazir. Deal with that which is broken, fix that which is broken, and then you could go on to Kedusha. Rabbi say, what do Chazal come along and say, get ready for this? Says the Rebbe, get ready for this. Chazal say, we're going to put Nazir before Sotah. Because sometimes in life, I can't fix my Sotah. Sometimes in life, that which is broken is just too broken, too overwhelming, and it's too painful. And I can't, I know it. I know that I'm not ignoring the broken kite. I just can't deal with it right now. Chazal said it's okay. Nazir comes before Sotah. Sometimes Kedusha comes before Tikkun. Kedusha comes, right? Sometimes positivity has to come before the negativity. So Chazal put Nazir before Sotah. And Abosai says the Imram, says the Ger Rebbe, that you can even read it in the pasuk. And we read Sur Meirav Yaseh Tov to mean that what? To mean that Lamaisa, a person has to go ahead and first take care of the negative and then deal with the positive. The Rebbe said, in the house you can read the pasuk. Sometimes in life, Sur Meirav. Sometimes you have to put the Ra on the side. Put the Ra on the side, V'yaseh Tov. And focus on creating dynamic positivity in your life. With the hope that if you create the dynamic positivity, that'll give you the koach to deal with that which is broken sometime later on. Incredible, I both say. So again, if Baruch Hu says Sotah then Nazir, Chazal say Nazir then Sotah, Sur Meirav V'yaseh Tov. Sometimes I can't deal with that which is broken, so I'm going to put it on the side. And I'm just going to fill my life with such dynamic positivity that I'll be able to find the strength to fix that which is broken somewhere down the road. Incredible. It says, go back there. Says Gemara, Hamakana as well says, remember again, so the Mishnah said, Hamakana. I will say, Lashon of Hamakana means if one warns his wife. So we'll say, this sounds like a Lashon of B'di'evet. Di'evet and Lechatchila lo. So we'll say, this sounds like this whole concept. We'll say, in general, by the way, it's a fundamental shayla. Is the process of Sotah like Lechatchila or B'di'evet? Obviously, we're talking about a very B'di'evet circumstance, right? But Lamaisa, again, Lashon of Hamakana sounds like this is not ideally something that a man should do. So it's saying Hamakana, if you warned your wife, man warned his wife, so Di'evet in Lechatchila, Kasavar Tana Didan, Asr Lekanos. So we'll say our Tana actually holds that Allah Lamaisa is really Asr. Ideally, one should not go ahead and do kinoi to his wife. I will say, now why not? So why does the Tana hold that ideally warning one's wife in this way is not a good idea? So I'll say, if you take a look at Rashi Asal Kanos Shemevi Atzmo Lidei Tagar Ves Ishol Nedivo. I will say, can you imagine the shalom bias problems that one creates with Sotah? So I'll say, I've often thought about this, that just play this out, right? A man warns his wife because he thinks that something's going on. You will say, what's the best case scenario in this situation? The best case scenario, right? Best case scenario is she doesn't violate the warning, right? Okay, what's the second best case scenario? She violates the warning, she goes to the Beis HaMikdash, she drinks the water, and she's innocent. You will say, can you imagine the walk home from that? Right? Can you imagine? Where should we go for dinner? Right? What do you think we should do? She's just been degraded and debased in front of the entire Beis HaMikdash, right? In other words, like, this is, I don't know how many studies came out from, like, Beis HaMikdash times. It'd be very interesting to see how many marriages actually survived after the Sotah process. So I will say, so what's incredible to see over here is, ultimately, again, our Tana is saying, don't do kinui. Don't do it. In other words, if you need to get divorced, get divorced. Right? But one thing is clear is this process is going to introduce such tagar. Tagar is fighting, and nivel means your wife is going to be degraded. Your wife is going to be actively degraded in front of other people. This is not a good idea. So therefore the Tana says, Hamakana, if you decide to go down this road, okay, here's how you do it. But the truth is, this is not the way to salvage your marriage. Incredible. So we'll say, this is what I was saying before. Rish Lakish, when he would open his shir on Sotah, he would open up with the following statement. Ein mezavkin lo la'adam isha ela lefi masav. I will say, a man is given a wife who reflects his own inner character. Literally, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes ahead and gives a man a wife, ultimately lefi masav, according to his actions and his own character. I will say, take a look at Rashi. Mezavgin isha lefi masav, tsnua l'tzadik, uprutza l'rasha. The tzaddik is given a modest woman, and ultimately the rasha is given an immodest woman. Others will say, what the Gemara is saying over here is, one's wife is often a reflection of his own inner piety or lack thereof. I was saying before, how Chazal were saying to the husband, do not play the self-righteous card that your wife has committed such a terrible thing. If this is happening in your house, it is incredibly important to look in the mirror and to try to understand what may be happening with you. In Mezavgin, and I will say in general, by the way, this line is an operative line, and a key line in Shalom Bayis issues. Because whenever it comes, everyone has Shalom Bayis issues in different ways. So the Maisa, when a Shalom Bayis issue comes up, it is so easy to point the accusatory finger. It is so important to say, ultimately, again, when there is discord in the home, what's my role in this? In other words, instead of look inward, because again, it's my wife, it's my wife, it's my wife. Okay, a wife is very often a reflection of the husband. So lemaisa, again, maybe when there is discord or dysfunction, what does that say about me? And obviously, it doesn't mean in every case. No, but lemaisa, it's an incredible starting point in terms of focusing on that which is going wrong within a marriage. As the pasuk says, the staff of the wicked will not rest upon the righteous. Amar Rabba, Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Both say, here we go. Listen to this. It is harder for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or it is as hard for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make one shidduch, to make one right, to make a marriage, like it was to split the sea. And I will say, now what's so hard? What does that mean? If you look at Rashi will say the last short line in Rashi, Hanach Telefi Masav. What the Gemara is saying over here is the ability to not just to match up, to make a match, but to bring people together and to have a husband and wife who are reflective of each other. That is as difficult as Kriyas Yamsuf. What happened in Kriyas Yamsuf? Kriyas Yamsuf was Rashi says, Shinishtanu Sidrei Bereshis. Ultimately, again, the laws of nature were changed. So we'll say, sounds like what the Gemara is saying is, making a shidduch, bringing two people together, is like changing the laws of nature. Why? Look at Rashi. We'll say, listen to this. Actually, before we get to that, the pasuk says, Shnei Amar, Elokim Moshe b'yichidim beisa, motzi asirim b'koshar. Kadosh Baruch Hu brings individuals into a home together, i.e. marriage, just like He took us out in the right appointed time. So we'll say that second part of the pasuk is a reference to Yetzias Mitzrayim. So you see over here a connection between the Exodus and Shidduchim. Just like Kadosh Baruch Hu took us out during the springtime, a right time for us, so too He brings proper people together in a home. Rashi says over here, we'll say first wide line, we'll say it's a great Rashi. Moshe b'yichidim beisa, Adam Yochid, v'isha yichida, v'hu mezav gun yachim yashemes. We'll say, listen to this. What's so miraculous about nature? What is so miraculous about nature? We'll say what's so miraculous is people are complex. So Adam Yochid, a person, a man, is like a world unto himself, right? Is an individual with his own wants, desires, dreams, aspirations. A woman is a being unto herself with her own dreams, goals, aspirations. I will say, it makes absolutely no sense that two people should be able to build a life together. Because each of those individuals are a yachid, but yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings one individual and another individual and brings them together ultimately again to build something beautiful. And that, to a certain degree, is no less miraculous and against the order of creation as the splitting of the sea. Just as miraculous as splitting the sea. Just like the splitting of the sea was against the laws of nature, so too bringing two individuals who are worlds unto themselves into a marriage is no less a change of nature. So the Gemara says, really, is that true, Ini? That bringing people together for marriage is changing the laws of nature? The Bible said, listen to this, but yet we learned that 40 days before a child is born, a voice comes out from heaven and says, Bas ploni leploni, Beis ploni leploni, Sada ploni leploni. That there are certain things that are divinely ordained. And I will say, amongst those things that are divinely ordained are who you're going to marry. Right? So a Baskol comes out, even before I'm born, a Baskol says, Reuven's going to marry Rachel. So I don't understand. If the Baskol says it, I will say, then it's ordained. Then what? That it's not against the laws of nature, right? That it's not, in other words, it's not supernatural. It's not supernatural. So what's going on? I will say, this is an incredible answer. The Gemara says, Lokasha, habezug rishon, habezug sheni. I will say, one is talking about the first marriage, and one is talking about the second marriage. Meaning what I will say, first marriage is Baskol marriage. Right? First marriage is where the divine voice calls out and says, Ploni is going to marry Plonis. Right? That's divinely ordained. The second marriage, I will say, is the one that requires a lot more divine maneuvering. Right? Why? Because often for second marriages to occur, there are multiple pieces that are moving on the chessboard of life. So I will say, that's in the realm of the much greater supernatural. That's where, again, if you look at Rashi, by the way, Rashi says over here, Zug Sheni, it's in the wide lines, 2, 4, 2, 4, 5. So first of all, Rashi says, Zug Rishon, Lefia Mazel. Right? The first marriage of both sides, that's Mazel. That's mazel. And mazel, over here we'll say mazel doesn't mean luck, right? Mazel means like ordained. Ordained. Zug Shaindy, Rashi says, lefi ma'asav, is in accordance with one's actions. The kashal is zavgon, lefi she'eno basugo. So we'll say, so the Gemara is giving two answers over here. Number one, that this idea, that first of all, the Gemara is answering that the second marriage is lefi masav, a reflection of the husband's actions, which again, I want to point out, not everyone agrees with that approach of Rashi. Some explain that even the first marriage itself is lefi masav. But rather, when the Gemara says kashal zavgon kriyas yamsov, when the Gemara says ultimately again that it is harder to go ahead and make one marriage like it was to split the sea, i.e. it's supernatural, the supernatural marriage is second marriage. Because that requires the movement of so many independent pieces to bring two people together for that second relationship. The first marriage, that's baskol. That's baskol. That's ultimately, again, ordained by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Incredible. So let's go back there. Much more to say about that. But we have absolutely ridiculous agadata in this Masechta. Ridiculous. Like, over the top. There's nice agadata, pleasant agadata, right? Entertaining agadata, interesting agadata, out of this world agadata. This is ridiculous agadata. So we'll say each of these Gemaras, I just want to point out, are like, you could do a shir on itself, especially this Gemara over here. A lot of marriage material in this. All right, we'll have to come back. So now let's get into the machlokes. So the primary machlokes here, Rabbi say, was about the nature of stira, right? Because remember, again, everyone's agreeing that for kinui, for a warning, ultimately, again, you need two witnesses. The machlokes was in the realm of stira, right? In the realm, ultimately, again, of witnessing her seclusion with the man about whom she was warned. So Rabbi Eliezer says you just need one witness, or even the husband himself. Rabbi Yehoshua says you need two witnesses. Let's analyze. So the Gemara says, Ad kan lo pligi ela bekinui stira. So I'll say, first of all, the machlokes over here is only by kinui and stira. Right? Aval betuma eid echa mehemen. Oh, fascinating. So we'll say there is another potential stage of this, which is not, you'll see, is tuma. But we'll say, let's say someone actually sees Rachel have relations with Shimon. So in other words, we'll say, the case over here is Ruvain is married to Rachel. Ruvain warns Rachel in front of two witnesses, do not be alone with Shimon. So we'll say, so now there's a machlokes if she's alone with Shimon. How many witnesses do you need in order to trigger the Sotah process? So again, Rabbi Eliezer says one, or the husband himself. Rabbi Yehoshua says two. The Gemara now points out by the machlokes is only about tuma. Sorry, only about stira. Tuma, Rabbi Eliezer means if let's say there's a witness that actually says I saw Rachel have relations with Shimon. Everyone agrees that one witness is enough, Rabbi Eliezer, for that for tuma. Now, I just want to point out what's the impact of one witness who says that Rachel had relations with Shimon. What's the impact of one witness? Again, remember, can't trigger a death penalty, obviously. What it does do is, it would prevent her from drinking the Sotah, and essentially would trigger the dissolution of the marriage. That would be the impact of an Eid Echad, right? There could be no capital punishment, obviously. There's no Sotah process anymore because we now have an Eid Echad that says she did commit adultery. It would trigger the dissolution of the marriage. Good. So I'll say, right? If an Eid Echad says, I saw Rachel have relations with Shimon, so the Gemara says, Lo haisa shosa. She would no longer drink the Sotah. So I'll say, so this is an incredibly important part. So the Gemara just highlighting to us, the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua is only on stira. How many witnesses you need to testify about seclusion. But everyone agrees that if there was an Eid Echad of Tumah, an Eid Echad who says, I saw Rachel have relations with Shimon, we're done. We're done. There's no drinking of the waters, and marriage will just simply be dissolved. When I say dissolved, in order to still need a get and everything, but the point is it'll bring everything to a halt. So the Gemara says as follows: I'll say, how do I know that an Eid Echad is believed? That's interesting. So now we're saying everyone agrees that an Eid Echad is believed by Tumah. So just tell me from where do I know ultimately again that an Eid Echad is believed in this case? This Tatan Rabbana, let's listen to this. Because the Pasuk says, Ve'eid ein ba. So I just want to point out over here, so the Gemara is quoting the Pasuk, V'shachav ish osa shichvas zara, talking about a case of adultery. Right? A married woman has relations with a man who's not her husband. V'ne'ela me'ene isha, and her husband didn't know about it. V'nistira, she was alone with the adulterer. V'nitma'a, she became defiled. Ve'eid ein ba. And ultimately, again, there's no testimony. There's no witness. V'hilon ispasa. She was not coerced. She was not coerced. The Gemara says, ve'edein ba. What does it mean there was no witness? So I will say, aid. How do you translate aid? How do you translate aid? One witness. But listen to this. Bishnaim akasim medaber. The Gemara says, no. Aid in this context actually means what? Two witnesses. Now, how do you do that? Watch this, I will say. Oh, eno ela filu be'echad. Or maybe, maybe it means even one witness. Talmud lomar, lo yakum eid echad bi'ish. I will say, I have another pasuk. The pasuk says, in general, we do not believe in eid echad. Right? If an eid echad comes and give testimony, we do not believe in eid echad. I was saying, I watch this. This is incredible. I'm a base. Mimash mashenemar lo yakum eid bi'ish. I will say, here's what's interesting. That pasuk says an eid echad. I will say, the fact that now here's what's interesting, right? Eid echad. I will say it's redundant, right? Why is it redundant? Because eid itself is singular. Eid itself is singular. So why do you have to say in eid echad? Just say lo yakum eid bi'ish. A witness cannot give. So why does it say echad? Listen to this. What I'll say. So lo yakum eid bi'ish. If we would have just said eid, I know that it's echad. So ma talmud lomar echad. So we'll say, why do you have to add in the word echad? Here we go. Ze bona av. Rabbi say a binyan av is a paradigm. It's creating a paradigm. What's the paradigm? Kol makom shene'emar eid harei kan shnayim ad sheyifot lecha kosuv echad. So we'll say, listen to this to teach me a very important lesson, which is, in general, whenever the Torah says the word aid, right? I will say aid, which although it's singular, actually means what? Two. So I'll say the word aid really means not a witness, rather, what does it mean? A testimonial unit. Whenever you see the word aid means a testimonial unit, unless, of course, the Torah modifies the word aid with what? With an echad. I will say, so now, the Amrach want to trade less ba'el echad. I will say, now watch this. Now, when I go back to the pasuk of adultery, I see something very interesting, right? The Torah says, ve'eid ein ba, v'hilon is plus, right? Ve'eid ein ba, there's no witness. I will say, so now I know, what does eid ein ba actually mean? What does it actually mean? There are two witnesses, right? But how many witnesses are there? There's one witness, v'hilon is spasa, and she wasn't coerced. In that case, asura. So the pasuk itself teaches me that in this case of adultery, where she is alone, right? This case of Sotah, where she is alone with this man, ve'edein ba. There are not two witnesses that she committed adultery, but there is what? There is one. Assuming she was not coerced, asura. So the pasuk itself tells us that an eid echad has the ability to testify that she committed adultery, and that testimony of an eid echad makes her asura to her husband. Incredible. So the only reason I have this drasha is because the Torah says lo yakum eid echad, and that gives me the binyan. That creates the paradigm. Halav haki. Without this, havamina eid sotah chatu. I would have assumed that the aid being referred to in the pasuk when it says ve'eid ein ba, I would have assumed that what does ve'eid mean? Aid means one witness. V'afilu chad leka elohim misra, but that can't be, because what is the pasuk saying? The pasuk saying v'hi, right? She's alone with the man. V'hi nitma ve'eid ein ba. That what aid means? No one saw her. Well, if no one saw her, how is she becoming asur? To which the Gemara says itzrik sakadai chamina eid ein ba ein ne'eman ba. I would have thought the pasuk eid ein ba means there is a single witness, but perhaps again we don't believe this single witness. So the Gemara says ein ne'eman ba. But he wouldn't be believed the elamai boy ad the elamai boy. So then we'll say, what is it exactly that will be necessary? Ad the ikut trey. Maybe perhaps the pasuk is coming to say that ultimately again you need two witnesses even for tumah. I says the Gemara, if that's the case, lishtok kra mine. Let the pasuk be quiet, not say anything. And I would have said asya davar mimamon. I will say, and I could have made it. We're going to talk about this. There's a gzera shava of davar between erva, between arayos and mamon and monetary matters. Just like monetary matters ultimately require two witnesses, so too what? So too arayos, right? Or immorality is going to require two witnesses as well. Va'ani yedana, and I would have understood midi dahavya kol edger shabatorah. I was about to say, the Torah didn't have to say anything in this case of Sotah. And if the Torah would have remained mum, right, said nothing about Sotah, I would have assumed that what is the testimonial threshold you need to reach in order to trigger any kind of isser? What do you need? Two witnesses. Because it's like, two witnesses are always the default. Always the default. So don't say anything, and I would have just assumed that two witnesses are what you need. So to which the Gemara says, no. Istrich Sakadat Chamina, you need it. Why? I would have thought, Sotah, Shaindy, Traglayim Medavar. I would have thought in general, Sotah maybe is a little bit different case. Why? Because again, we have it over here. We'll say, here's the word, Raglayim Medavar. There's some level of circumstantial evidence. How so? Because after all, he did warn her. She is in violation of that very same warning. So I would have thought logically, therefore, 8 echad should be believed. Rabbi say, is it logical to say that an 8 echad wouldn't be believed in this case? The Sharia, and she should be permitted. I will say, but again, ultimately, from the fact that the pasuk says she was not coerced, Michlal da Asura. I understand from that the pasuk is telling me that this woman is prohibited. So I would have thought Ein Ne'eman Ba Adi Ikatre. I would have thought ultimately again, in reality, you need 2 witnesses. Or betray Nami, and even with 2 witnesses, you betray Nami, he lo nispasa. Even with 2 witnesses about say halacha l'maisa, you still need to ascertain that she was not coerced, because obviously if she was coerced, halacha l'maisa, she is not liable. Kamashon, we'll say, so bottom line, Kamashon, we'll say, what does it take from this entire thing? Full circle, we'll say, everyone agrees inside the Rambam Paskins that an 8 echad is ne'eman by tumah. So we'll say, I just want to point out, so we've done a lot already today in the short amount of time we've been in Masechah Sotah. We've established that for kinui, everyone agrees that what? 2 witnesses. Warning must be delivered in the presence of witnesses. Well, we've also just established about saying how the Rambam Paskins gave enough. I'm not going to quote it to you, but you'll look up in the Rambam Paskins, 8 echad ne'eman b'tumah, which means that if after the warning, she was secluded, and not only was she secluded, but what Rabbi say, you have an 8 echad who comes forward and says, I saw Rachel have relations with Shimon. Rabbi say, what happens? That witness is believed, she's asura. We're going to see what that means is she has to get a get. There's no sota process. And Rabbi say, everyone agrees, 8 echad is ne'eman by tumah. Which then leaves us with the only pocket of machlokes, which is where? Stira. That's the machlokes for Rabbi Yehoshua in the Mishnah. Good, let's go weiter. Rabbi Yehoshua Mekarnala Pishnayim. So also remember, Rabbi Yehoshua says that Allah Chalamaysa Kinui is done with 2, and ultimately again, Stira requires 2 as well. Says the Gemara, what's Rabbi Yeshua's logic? Amar Kra, Ba. The pasuk says Ba. Right? The pasuk says Ba. So again, V'shach, it's supposed to say it's the same pasuk. Ve'ed ein Ba. So says the Gemara, Ba v'lo bekinui. It teaches me that what? I will say Rabbi Yehoshua is of the opinion that Allah ba v'lo bekinui. Ultimately, again, this applies. Ultimately, ba. In other words, it's only tumah. It's only tumah which requires an 8 echad, right? Only tumah which requires an 8 echad, but not kinui. Ba v'lo bekinui, ba v'lo bestira. So I will say it's very interesting. So Rabbi Yehoshua will look at the word ba. Remember, what did we just dash from ba? Ba means that for tumah you only need an 8 echad, but ba means in tumah you only need an 8 echad. But not for kinui and not for stira. Both of those processes will require what? 2 edim. So much Rabbi Lezer says ba v'lo bekinui. Rabbi Lezer says ba means only for tumah 8 echad is enough, but for kinui you're going to require 2 witnesses. The ima ba v'lo bestira. Maybe it means ultimately again. I will say maybe ba means ultimately again for tumah and not for stira. Right, not for stira. Stira is kishlo tumah. Ultimately, I will say stira is compared to tumah. This is Rabbi Eliezer's position. Right, stira is compared to tumah. The pasuk says she is secluded and she is defiled. So there is the Torah equates ultimately again stira with tumah. Just like tumah only needs an 8 echad, so to stira according to Rabbi Eliezer is also only going to need an 8 echad. The Gemara says. Good. Kinui nami is kishlo tumah, but kinui is also compared to tumah. The kinui is ishto v'hi nitma. Pasuk says he warns his wife and she becomes defiled, and so we should also say that kinui only requires 8 echad. To which the Gemara says hamiyit rachmana ba. The Torah comes along and says the exclusionary word ba. Umara. So we'll say, how do you know what to compare to what? Here we go. Mistara will say first white line. Mistabra stira adifa. The shekain osarta kituma. It would appear that ultimately, again, stira is adif. Why? Because it's stira that ultimately goes ahead and makes her aser just like tumah. And therefore, if tumah is only going to require 1, stira should only require 1. Adrabah, kinui adif. Kinui should be more important. Why? Shekain ikar garama. Because also without kinui what? There's no process. To which the Gemara says, 1 second, I lav stira kinoi mi'ika. But 1 second, if there's no stira, does the kinoi ever become meaningful? The lav kinoi stira mayahani. But without kinoi, ultimately again, stira doesn't impact her. Afilu hachi stira adifa daschalta de tumah. Nevertheless, stira is more adif. Why? Because it's the beginning of tumah. Everyone say that's why Rabbi Eliezer will choose to say that halachos of stira resemble the laws of tumah. And just like tumah, as we've talked about before, is established through an eid echad, so too stira is established by an eid echad as well. To which the Gemara says, Mas Nisin delo ki haitana. So we'll say, so again, what we are left with is our fundamental machlokes. So the good news is we have a lot of stuff that everybody agrees on. 2 witnesses for kinui, 1 witness for tumah. What's the shaila? Stira. Rabbi Eliezer says 1 witness or the husband himself. Rabbi Yehoshua, 2 witnesses. And I both say, interestingly enough, the real machlokes seems to come about in trying to figure out what do you compare stira to. Should stira be compared to kinui, or should stira be compared to tumah? That's the fundamental machlokes. To which the Gemara says, Masnisin delo ki aitana. Our Mishnah does not reflect the view of the following Tana. I will say, all right, you know what? So we'll stop over here for today. Okay, we're running a little bit behind already, and I'm in the Sotah. Okay, we're gonna be all right in Yirtzeh Hashem. I'll say, but again, an incredible start. So we have our halacha l'mais in terms of the outline processes of kinui, and ultimately against a beautiful agarata. I will say, Yirtzeh Hashem, the exciting journey, continues tomorrow. Shkayach, everyone. Look, Baruch Hashem, we'll be all right. We'll get it.